Science and Disaster Management. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, could you please rename yourself? Then we will know. Write your name, but write down BSc, MSc. Then we will know. अरे वो प्रवीण सर को भेजना है किधर? उसको बोल जल्दी खाए ना, 3 बजे 3:15 मीटिंग है. So very good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me, students?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So very good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, sir.
Today's yes, today is the meeting, which is an inaugural lecture for the Environmental Science and Disaster Management MSc program, which RJ College is starting from this year. Uh, you have been a student of this college for say maybe 3 years or 5 years for that matter. But I have been in this institution for almost 32 years now. I joined this institute as a postgraduate student and then joined as a lecturer in the Department of Botany. Why I'm saying this is what we have seen over the years that the management and the head of the institution, that the principal, always have at their heart working towards the excellence in the sense that under the same roof you offer maximum courses to the students, so that on one side you keep the comfort level of the student of being at the same institute intact, at the same time you also grow along with. For those who know a little bit of our history, that our college was started by a postman, Shri Nand Kishore Singh ji, fondly known as Jairam ji. He was a soldier in the Second World War at the Turkey front. Indian troop of 250 soldiers was fighting. Unfortunately, the Indian troop was survived post-war only by one soldier, Nandkishore Singh ji. He was hailing from a village in UP, and in his childhood he had tough time reaching to his school and completing his education. So since then he had a dream that if God makes me instrumental, I would like to start a small Hindi medium school for the other brothers and sisters of my community, my village. So post his tenure in the army, he was posted in Mumbai post office. He took up a job of delivering post to different houses. By then he thought he will meet people, he will explain them about his dream, and whatever little charana athana are obtained, he will start a school. That's how we came into existence. But slowly but steadily, we went on adding the courses. And in that quest for offering more and more opportunities to students under one roof on the same campus, that this year we have started with two PG programs. One is in data science and artificial intelligence, and the second one is this environmental science with disaster management. This post COVID period, rather post is a very optimistic, it is still going on in this COVID period. We have understood the importance of the management system that can keep us prepared for any kind of disaster. And for that matter, environment is something that we all uh, deal with in day-to-day life. So I welcome the students of postgraduate studies in environmental sciences and disaster management. मैं किया है गाइड ऑन है So students, today we have kept an inaugural lecture related to the subject. Dr. Manoj Borkar, Professor, Department of Zoology, Carmel College of Women, is soon going to join us. We'll also be joined by our former head of Zoology Department, Dr. PG Kale, our beloved principal madam, who is now a director of academics at HVPS, is also around. Madam had gone to university for some work, but is now in 5 minutes joining. So let us have a very good start for the new course. We seek blessings of Goddess Saraswati that in this new venture, her blessings remain with us. And we also look for the best wishes of you all that our college takes one more leap step in offering courses to the student at postgraduate level. We meet with success. Well, any institution is incomplete without the wonderful students like you. Many of you after BSc program have come for MSc program. Those who have come from outside college, you are now a part of Junjunwala family. We welcome you all. And those who have been arts, you are the ambassadors of the college, and you have to keep the name going and you have to keep the success intact. So with this kind words, I once again welcome the students of postgraduate studies in environmental sciences and disaster management. I also would like to thank the TY students of botany and zoology who are present here. This gives you an opportunity to the, or this gives you an answer to the question that you always ask, what after BSc? One of the option is here in front of you. A postgraduate study subject which is most relevant and I also thank my teachers from Department of Botany who have come here to for the in solidarity of the fact that any venture in the department is not one person activity, it's a teamwork and everyone contributes to the same in whatever possible way they can. So thank you teachers, thank you students, thank you postgraduate students for being here. We will soon be joined by our guest and our another guest, Dr. Kale. However, Usha madam is soon joining to address you all. Thank you very much.
नमस्कार मनोज जी काळे.
Namaskar, sir. Very good afternoon to you and everybody who's
good afternoon.
joined.
Welcome to Dr. Manoj Borkar.
Namaskar, madam. Namaskar. Good to hear everybody online.
Yeah. Sir, this is our first batch. So
Yes,
as you are aware, first batch is always the pet batch.
Absolutely.
We are also looking at the batch with a great sense of enthusiasm that they will definitely learn not only as a subject, but they'll really contribute.
Most certainly. That is what is expected.
Yes. Otherwise, I always say this praise. आप कितना भी डिग्री लेके घूमो कोई फायदा नहीं है जब तक उसको आप अमल नहीं करो कहीं ना कहीं.
बिल्कुल सही बात है. बिल्कुल सही कहा आपने.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
It's my pleasure. As always, it's my pleasure. Anything for academics. And as I always say in all the fora, wherever I get invited, I think I owe a lot to your state of Maharashtra. So this is a small gesture or reciprocation for all that I've received from your benevolent state of Maharashtra. I think I wouldn't have been what I am today had I not spent those formative years at Mumbai learning and attempting to grasp a lot of. So whatever little I have been able to accumulate in my gray matter has all come from Maharashtra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So on behalf of Hindi Vidya Prachar Samiti, Ram Niranjan Junjunwala College, I extend a very, very warm welcome to Dr. Manoj Borkar. And he is not only an academician, but a great contributor to disseminate the information and also the concerns of environment so that our youth are more prepared and they shall take care of Mother Earth. I have with me my very own classmate, Dr. P.G. Kale, who is also a very ardent teacher, and he writes very good articles in Lok Satta, all concerning environment. So I request Dr. P.P. Kale to formally introduce Dr. Manoj Borkar.
Namaskar, everybody.
Namaskar,
It's
sir.
a pleasure to it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Manoj Borkar to all of you, the young generation students particularly. Dr. Manoj Borkar, professor of zoology at Carmel College, University of Goa, has been working there since 1988 in the Carmel College, which is a college for women's mainly in University of Goa. Founder chairman of the biodiversity research cell, involved in training, research, and providing consultancy in the field of biology. Was building capacities in biodiversity conservation and management. Well, appraisal and mitigation services. Well, he has been contributing to biodiversity research right from 1990s when he had his pioneering work on crocodiles of Kambarjua Canal, and this attracted attention of national and international agencies. IUCN's crocodile specialist group commissioned his work in 1993 itself. Well, he has also contributed inventorying various faunal taxa in Goa, like butterflies, moths, dragonflies, spiders, scorpions, fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, and so on. He also has been instrumental in getting a Center for Research in Zoology recognized by University of Goa in Carmel College. He has been a founder member of Goa State Biodiversity Board and had occasions to represent
Hello. Sir, I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you. Is that a connectivity problem at your end or mine? So can you hear me? Hello?
Hello. Hello. कुठला कनेक्शन लूज झालाय?
काले सर मीटिंग कुछ एंड हो गया क्या?
हाँ, yes. I
या
don't
एक
know how.
मिनट, एक मिनट.
Yes, madam, I'm back. There was some issue with
Now
my.
you're back. Okay, I think there was a temporary some issue.
Some issue. I am not too sure whether it was at my end or your end, but nonetheless, I thought I would
Okay,
exit.
but you are now co-host, huh, sir? You can share your screen.
Yes, ma'am. No, I have not much to share in terms of visuals, except for the slide that you could possibly see now. Are you able to see the slide? Just let me see. I have just absolutely one single slide that I would like to
Okay,
share.
how
with-
nice.
1 minute, ma'am. This is all that I have to share. And I think I will do, I would prefer to talk rather than show any slides. So I
All
am
right,
not sure.
sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, this can be seen?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you as well as see.
That is perfectly fine.
I'm very
Just
sure
one.
students can also see.
1 minute, dear madam. 1 minute, dear. Let me just adjust things and then maybe we will, without wasting any time. My sincere apologies for the technical glitch. I am not very computer savvy either. From that point of view, I belong to the older generation of
No
the
problem, sir. But your voice is coming very loud and clear.
Not okay. Now, if I have your permission, allow me to begin my interaction with the faculty and the students of this newly launched. If I got it right, today is the inaugural function of this
Yes,
master's program in environmental science and disaster mitigation or management. I'm not too sure of the word.
Yeah,
Management.
mitigation is equally important.
Disaster management, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Right. I think, and I'm glad that I have something to say about the course title itself. And maybe you would notice very curiously that I put an exclamation mark and a question mark after the title that was suggested by you, the concerns of environment. So when I put an exclamation, it's as if to say that, it's a little surprising that a phrase to that extent could be coined, that we are concerned about the environment. I mean, we need to reflect on our moral grounds to be concerned when we know very well that the contemporary crisis itself has its genesis in our actions. So
Yes.
a little bit of philosophical, ethical reflection is what I seek to do in the next 45 minutes or 30 minutes. Please feel free to interrupt and tell me as and when you feel that I'm crossing my time limit. All right, so I think this is the only slide that I have for you and everybody who's attending this webinar. And I think this one single slide speaks volumes. As they say, one good image is equivalent to God alone knows how many discourses and lectures and brain-teasing sessions. What this image is probably trying to convey to you is a reflection in the still waters of what the world would probably be like without us. This, of course, could be interpreted and construed in more than one ways, but the meaning that I seek to convey and I would say prod and instigate everybody to think about is that, well, I think we have to a large extent invaded the planet. We have been desperately attempting to dominate it, exploit it, of course, and you know, we have that. We have assumed that position of arrogance and a position of supremacy where we have started all this while we were only behaving and presuming, but we started acting arrogant towards the planet. And over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to kind of give you enough and more reasons to believe that we are indeed a very exploitative species, and the planet, despite all its resilience and what have you, is certainly not able to take it any further. I think we have done enough damage, and it's time that we reverse this assault on the planet. So yes, you may wonder, why am I attempting to philosophize, or why this philosophy of ourselves or our species to be a dominating species? Not many people would be happy with the kind of attributes I've given to our own species as being arrogant, as being exploitative, as being dominating and whatnot, but that's a matter of fact. I don't wish to preempt anything at this juncture, but let me say this to start with, that you are in a kind of an enviable position as students of environmental sciences, because you would over the next couple of years get a very formal, access and exposure to the rigors of scientific thinking in terms of environment. You probably, I'm sure, I mean, apart from what Madam Usha has very rightly highlighted, got to do with not just for the sake of learning that you will and you shall be learning this. Am I audible, by the way? Am I being heard? Can somebody respond? Thank you. In case I'm not being heard, madam, just give me a call. I have my cell phone next to me. If the connectivity is interrupted, I should not be speaking to myself, Right. What is very pertinent, what Dr. Usha Mukundan has rightly conveyed is that we don't just kind of, enroll and engage ourselves in this kind of intellectual exercises for the sake of earning a degree, which in all probability would probably be framed and hung on a wall, where you should get some opportunities, if not very remunerative, even otherwise, to contribute to the larger system in ensuring that the pain that the earth is going through at this point of time is alleviated, and you try to make it a little lesser by opting for a more earth-friendly lifestyle, or what we love to speak about as sustainability or sustainable lifestyles is something that we really don't practice. Unfortunately, there's a saying, preachers preach as I do, as I say, not as I do. So there's a lot of gap between our, preaching and our practice. And that's hopefully that gap would narrow down, or hopefully it would just, probably move out of your lives once you get a more intense understanding of environmental scheme of things, the kind of the dynamism that associates with whatever happens in the environment, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, what is expected of you by the end of 2 years is the objectives and learning outcome apart. You are intended to be a little more eco-sensitive and environmentally aware citizen of this great state, which you love to identify with as Maharashtra, and of course the larger landscape of which we all are very proud as the country, which of course has a very bright future, called India or Bharat. So yes, it is not an empty rhetoric. We are not looking at some kind of empty qualifications, but as students of environmental science, and I'm very glad they've also included the component of disaster management. Of course, personally, I believe that we need to invest more in mitigation than manage. Management is a post-occurrence intervention, whereas mitigation is a pre-occurrence intervention. You don't mitigate when a disaster already struck you, right? Mitigate would mean you put in place a system by which you either avert a disaster, which is not always possible because most of the natural disasters, as they rightly call it, are acts of God. I mean, that's a little far-fetched idea. I mean, God is always benevolent and God would not seek to damage and destroy anything, really speaking. But nonetheless, especially for people who've been claiming those, the insurance policies for any kind of damage inflicted through the so-called acts of God, would blame it on God. But it's mitigation is also what is supposed to lessen the impact of a disaster on life and property. So if you ask me, in my personal opinion, I think the emphasis even in your course hopefully shall also be not only on management, but also on mitigation. I'm sure that's an integral component of the whole discussion. That mitigation is meant to be all that you do either to avert, which again, let me reiterate, is not always possible. But I'm sure and certain that you could, with proper planning, with proper, if you're able to prospect the kind of disaster which is likely to hit you by virtue of your geography, maybe for example, if you're in a seismic zone where you are likely to have a lot of earthquakes. I mean, most certainly this kind of predisposition to an earthquake could always be integrated in the construction design. And that's basically what I mean by mitigation. But management would mean everything that you would do when the disasters actually struck you. So that's one angle of the story that, this course is very interesting, very important. And I hope and pray that you stay focused through this course and not only, find yourself a niche in the professional sphere, but also in your own personal lives, you will be more eco-sensitive and eco-conscious citizens of this country. Now, you may wonder, why have I put an exclamation and a question mark? Concerns on environment or of environment is, as I rightly say, is meant to either convey to you that we need to be aware that there are some issues that we need to take cognizance of. And at the same time, I am of the opinion that we also need to realize that the genesis, or if I may say, the epicenter of all the problems that you experience today in the larger environment or the landscape, waterscape, or wherever you talk about, is it starts with you and your actions. So it's a very interesting, complex situation in which you're seeking to redeem yourself of this sort of accusation and responsibility of having messed up with the planet, and at the same time you're seeking to kind of take note of it and put in place a system whereby this place, the earth, shall be a place where we can live more peacefully and in a mutual harmony with the fellow co-inhabitants of this planet. Mind you, this planet is not just about you and me. I hope you know that we share this planet. This is the only living planet which supports and sustains biodiversity with this kind of exemplary, mind-boggling mosaic of ecosystems and all the wonderful and amazing biodiversity reaches that it holds in terms of endowment. So yes, I would not want to kind of look at a reductionist view of environment as something that's only got to do with discussions on pollution and discussions on sustainability principles, or probably discussions on declining forest covers and vanishing species. But I think if one is to look at the word environment in a more comprehensive and holistic manner, it's absolutely, let me share this with you. More often than not, when I ask this question to my audience and on what exactly is the impression about this word environment, invariably I get this kind of response: in everything around us is environment, right? Everything around us is environment. You start listing out the trees, the plants, and you've got your water bodies, and you've got your assets and whatnot. You conveniently forget to include yourselves in the definition of the environment. So I believe, and that's what puts you, you stand apart and look at the whole scene, not quite realizing that one of the most important influence, and albeit a negative influence on the environment, is you yourself. And by you, I don't seek to personalize you in person per se, but your species or my species and our species, the Homo sapiens. And I'm sure we now live in Anthropocene, which is characterized by a dominion on this planet by our species. And if you look around and you probably compare it, you kind of reflect on the past, the history of the planet as it would have been some, thousands or 10,000s or millions years ago, the planet wasn't what it looks to be now. Today, you realize that you have completely altered the face of this planet with your manufactured capital. And that's a very interesting word, that in environmental discourses, we first try to impress upon the learner the whole notion of what is called as a manufactured capital. In simple words, everything that is a consequence or derivative of science and technology, right? What have you? You have your manufactured capital includes your roads and highways and bridges and 4 lanes and you know your skyscrapers in your factories and automation, what have you, your gadgets, your automobiles, everything that makes your life comfortable. Your comfort zone is largely in the manufactured capital. And what is the earth capital? What is this? The entire natural resource base, right? Your trees, your soil, your how would I put it? The mountain ranges, your Sahyadris, your how would I put it? The rivers, and absolutely anything and everything in which you and I have had no role to play in creating that asset, and that's called the earth capital. Look at it very carefully and dispassionately. You will realize that Usha ma'am, the proceedings of the lecture are being recorded, right? Hello, I want somebody to respond. The proceedings of this presentation is being recorded, right? Hello.
I think so, sir.
So, I mean, I am not able to record it, but I would appreciate if somebody please records it. I would not want to distract myself and record it. Kare sir, if you could kindly request somebody to just record this lecture, please. I'll be very obliged. Thank you so much. So apologies for the interruption. Environment is a very broad concept which includes the biotic, the abiotic constituents, the way they interact towards ensuring some sort of harmony in terms of exchange of matter which goes on in the environment, the energy transfer. So it's a jargon of everything that happens on this planet. I'm just talking about the planetary environment. I'm talking about the environment of the earth. So if you look at one simple reason, which prima facie may sound very selfish, but why, if somebody asks you, why worry about the environment? Why do you need, why all this tall talk and halla-gulla on environmental sciences and the need to protect environment? I think the simplest answer and one of the most frank, candid response could be because it's got to do with my survival, right? I mean, I believe all of you know, as students of biology and right from your school days, we've been told that no species can exist beyond its resources. Where are your resources coming from? But of course, the environment. So environment is your resource base, which obviously has to, ensure that for you to live and continue your genome by way of, transferring it to your descendants, you need to be sustained by this very natural resource base. So this is one of the most simplest argument or justification given to environmental protection. But I have a larger question to ask you. I mean, what exactly do you mean by the need to protect the environment? And I find this pretty interesting. Presently in my state, and some of you would probably be kind of keeping a track of the story, where some 3 linear infrastructure projects are set to be transacting some of our most green patches in our protected areas within the political jurisdiction of Goa. And, the proposed linear infrastructure also spills over into Karnataka. And that's got to do with, double tracking of railways, and it's got to do with a power transmission line. And it's also got to do with road widening. And all these 3 very interestingly are passing through and transacting the protected area. So there's a lot of resentment and opposition from the green lobby in Goa. Yesterday, in fact, on NDTV 24/7, Srinivasan Jain, the well-known reporter, he had a Fact File is the program in which I think it's going to be aired again this evening. If you find time, just do, you need to be appraised of what is happening around you. And remember, when you are students of environmental science, what should matter to is absolutely anything that happens in the environment, irrespective of your immediate political jurisdiction, because environment does not recognize any such political boundaries or jurisdiction. I mean, there is nothing called air of Maharashtra, air of Goa, air of Karnataka. Atmosphere is a continuous regime, right? Similarly, water, and I think that's true internationally. I mean, you do have for defense purpose airspace and whatever, or you have the exclusive economic zone in our waters. But the fact is, water is continuous, and air is continuous, and land is continuous. You may build boundaries. So whatever happens at one point in the landscape or waterscape ought to have repercussions, or rather serious repercussions elsewhere. So I think the first tenet, or the first principle of environmental, how would I put it, ethics or science is that we are all connected. I mean, there is no standalone existence. You don't live in isolation, right? You are connected. You may not appreciate that, but there are very clear, discrete connections, and therefore it's like a web. I mean, that's what you call the web of life and whatever. And anything that you do in one place could send strong vibrations throughout the this web of connections, and that's very important. So what is the ethical position that we really seek to take? I mean, ethically, now when you say concerns the environment, I often hear people saying, nowadays the campaign in Goa is Save Mole. Mole is the only national park that we have in our small maritime state called Goa, is a small part of the Bhagwan Mahavir Wildlife Sanctuary, which has been carved out and upgraded, designated national park. And I have heard people and I've seen people putting up placards, Save Mole, save environment. I have a simple question to raise. How do you save the environment? And do you have it in you in terms of your intellect, in terms of your acumen, in terms of your resources and action plan to save the environment? I would rather say it's the vice versa. It's the environment that saves you. And you have very little to be able to save the environment. So what should be ideally the slogan should be, do not destroy the environment. And that's basically what we do. The only way to save, and I hope you get me right, is the reverse logic that I'm just trying to use. The only way by which you can possibly save the environment is not by not destroying it. And I say this with a lot of conviction, because we are too small, and we are too, how to say, a minuscule fraction in the whole scheme of things to take upon ourselves this notion of being protectors of the environment. I mean, come on, God damn it, I don't think we play God and say we protect the environment. The fact is, it's the other way around. It is the environment that protects us. Right? And that's why I put it in my slide. The world without us would have been more greener, more pristine, and more, how would I say, teeming with life and whatever. So from the time that we have appeared on the planet, I think we've only done one thing, singularly one thing, and that's exploited, or rather overexploited, attempted to invade, dominate, leading to Anthropocene, whatever. And to a large extent, apologies for saying this, I'm being very radical in my views. I think it's a science and technology which has given us this sense of arrogance and catapulted us to a position of, how would I say, supremacy, where we have started believing that I am the manager, or maybe to make it worse, I almost conduct myself, as if I'm the absolute proprietor or the owner of this planet, right? And I'm free to use all the resources that lie around me in the way I, deem right. In a mode of complete indifference to ethics, feelings of natural objects. And you ask me, what do you mean feelings of natural objects? The earth feels the pain? Of course it does. And you have this new philosophy, which of course is more in the realm of ethics, and that's what is called deep ecology or Gaia, where we believe that just as you and I feel the pain after somebody assaults you or inflicts a wound on you, the earth is also very similarly responsive to the kind of assaults that we keep on heaping on it. I think we need to be aware of this. So there are essentially two worldviews or two positions that we can take as individuals. One, where we seek to present ourselves and conduct ourselves as if we are the owners of the planet, or maybe we are the managers of the planet. That I have all my science, technology, knowledge of management protocols and what have you, the whole jargon, by which I can be manipulative with the planet. I can use the resources to meet my wants in a mood of complete, how would I say, complacency and indifference to the demands and the requirements of generations that are to follow me. That's the whole notion of sustainability. So, that's what I keep on saying, that the scale of mass that we live on this planet today is a perfect indication, is proportionate to the level of respect we have for ourselves, our fellow human beings, and the generations to follow us. The more messy you leave this planet, the more disrespectful you are towards your fellow human beings and generation which is yet to arrive. I mean, we often conduct ourselves as if we are the last representatives of the human race on the planet. You just mess up and go away. We are not answerable to anybody. That is what is called as a planetary management worldview. It's a matter of ethics. And world ethics, or eco-ethics, I'm not sure, it's more into humanities. Today we live in an age of transdisciplinary discussions, and when we speak about eco-ethics, it's got more to do with an ethical way to understand ecology, or a sense of right and wrong in the way we relate to our earth. I mean, that's also very important. Ethics is not just what you practice in your professional and personal life. More important today is the way you practice ethics with your environment and with your planet. So I think that's absolutely important. And therefore, if your actions are guided by this sense of, how would I put it, responsibility, a sense which disallows you from indiscriminate use of resources, you are being more judicious in your use of Earth's resources, you are being more, how would I say, more rational, you are being more careful, you take upon yourself the role of a custodian rather than start feeling and behaving like a proprietor or an absolute, how would I say, owner of the planet, but you realize that all that there is around you is not just for me, but I need to share it with others, not just now in the present timeline, but also for people who are yet to follow me. And I think that instills in your mind and in your actions a sense of responsibility, a sense of, how would I say, moderation. I'm not very sure. I mean, there are boys and girls hopefully listening to me, and also my colleagues from the faculty departments. But today, what we really need to, we have excessively exploited the resources on the planet. And it's a scary scenario. I mean, we are loaded with selfish genes. Selfish gene is a very popular title, but we've forgotten our altruism. It's contra altruism. What we are demonstrating is absolutely contrary to the altruistic behavior. And I sometimes feel so dazed and so, kind of depressed that having finished and messed up with the planet, we even started turning to the skies. We started, looking at eyeing the other planets and the resources, if at all there are any, on any other planet in the solar system. And you also turned your attention to the sea floor. I mean, China is already very intensely and intensively scoring the seabed for minerals, and India is just about to follow. I think already the Indian authorities have declared that maybe in another 6 months' time, we are going to have a submersible that will probably investigate the seabed for minerals. Wonderful, and we all clap and we rejoice in this scientific adventure. But ethically, that is extending your assault to that hitherto inviolate part of the whole environment, which was still far away from your hungry gaze. How would I put it? It's now no longer safe. So that's a matter of ethics, and you really need to reflect on this. And I'm sure as students of environmental science, it's very important that you rise above these definitions and the core concepts, and also attempt to relate. I mean, that's very, very important. What you learn in your classrooms, you necessarily need to be able to relate to a real life situation. And that knowledge makes sense if you're able to correct your actions. So, and I just want to say this quickly at this point of time. There are certain objectives, and I always say this in my classes. Why do you learn environmental studies or environmental science or environmental biology? These are different domains. A lot of people think that these are synonyms. They are not. Ecology is different from environmental sciences, is different from environmental biology, and so on and so forth. But there is something which guides us, and the guiding principles are very similar. One, this kind of intellectual discourses is supposed to raise our awareness, right? And I always believe that any effort at mitigation, management, and what have you, seeks information. I mean, you cannot have action or you cannot have implementation before you're informed. So a good, balanced action would only emanate from a sound database, right? Awareness. You need to be aware. So one important objective of this course, which I'm sure your teachers will also agree and concur with me, is to raise your awareness level. And awareness can be raised in multiple ways. You need not be always sitting in a class or listening to webinars. I mean, even in your interaction with your fellow citizens, you talk about the eco tribes who are in fact more earth friendly and eco-friendly than you and I in the urban setup. So awareness. And it's not enough to be aware that at the end of 2 years, I've got my degree. So rejoice and say, flaunt your postgraduate status. and feel great about it is one way of looking at things. The other way is whether my awareness has actually changed my attitude and my perception of things around me, right? That's one of the objectives, that to bring about an attitudinal change, simultaneously allowing you to acquire a set of skills which will translate into action, which is earth friendly. And let me repeat this: awareness, attitudinal change, acquisition of skills, cumulatively altogether should lead to an earth friendly action. That alone is the ultimate objective environmental science. Not about it. Again, I borrow Ma'am Usha's words. Don't feel too happy that you've gotten in this course. You're going to be a postgraduate of your autonomous college. I think yours is an autonomous college probably. Or even if it's Mumbai University. That's not the benchmarking. The benchmarking is how are we going to transform the citizenry of this developing nation, a nation which is fast developing, a nation whose development aspirations have peaked in the recent times. And we have a major challenge in seeking to balance these developmental aspirations with our conservation concerns. Mind you, it is a tightrope walk. If you've seen the trapeze artists in a circus, right? Good old days when I was a child, we would have circus. Now I'm not too sure. But if you look at this man and women who can walk a tightrope, they will hold a long stick and attempt to balance themselves so that they don't fall from a height. And I believe that's exactly, and that's perfectly symbolic of what is expected of our generation, that you need to walk the rope by not falling this side, not that side. You don't take extremes of position, you stay in the middle path. And that's something very, very important. So, I mean, I think at this point, let me ask you a few questions, and and then somebody could argue with me. Environmentalists and the green lobby is often viewed as people who are anti-development. You know, the unfortunate impression that the lay people have and the political class have, and even for that matter, the bureaucracy and technocracy across the board have, is if you talk about environment, you ought to be anti-development. You don't want development. You are an impediment to our progress. I think that is a skewed impression. That's a sorry impression. That's not quite true. And probably we are responsible for conveying that kind of impression, that environment or environmentalism is definitely not about not wanting progress. I think it's insane for anyone to say, look, I don't want progress. We are not reverting back to Stone Age. We very much need progress, but the challenge is, how do we balance this, quest for progress with sustainable use of our resources? And that's again the buzzword that we keep on talking about, sustainability. I've already explained to you, in the present times of dominion, we have our selfish gene which is seeking to express now and then. We are completely contra-altruistic in our conduct. We almost start feeling invincible, indispensable. We're loaded with supremacy and a false sense of, I don't know what, command. We kind of put ourselves in a position of command. I think that's basically what we need to kind of sit, introspect and reflect and seek to correct our behavior. So a lot of people ask me, what's your take on this environmental crisis? And I give them one response, which I firmly believe in. There is no crisis of environment. It is a crisis of our mind. It's a crisis of our perception. It's a crisis of our relationship with the earth, where we have ceased to be ecocentric and we have opted for anthropocentric position. And that's exactly what I've asked. I've put in my slide, if you can watch, there's this word anthropocentrism. I mean, what exactly is it? That all your actions and intentions are completely centered around your own self and your own needs and your own actions. And ecocentrism would mean you look at the earth, you look at the ecology, you look at the environment, and your actions are guided by that. A lot of our ethnic tribes, a lot of our eco tribes, if you look at their lives, if you look at the kind of harmony that they have with the resources, they allow the resource to renew. I mean, you and I talk a lot about resource renewal dynamics and the need to recuperate and all that. It's all absolutely bookish. As I said, we know a lot. It's all theory. We probably mug it up because we need to write it down in the exams. Probably half the time we don't know what we write. We are unable to decipher and decode the exact meaning of what we are writing in the papers and scoring marks and feeling good about gold medals and top ranks in university. But if I ask you and if I evaluate you on a scale of How eco-friendly is your behavior? What kind of, I mean, this is very important, whether you leave a soft footprint or a strong handprint, and these are two, we are all expected to leave a very strong handprint, which is a positive action on the earth. In our lives and in our times, before we quit and hang our boots and exit this planet, I'm sure all of you know we are not immortals. None of us here, nobody absolutely, is going to be here forever, right? We are passengers in transit. So as long as we, are on the planet, we need to have a relationship which will, probably compel people who follow us to speak good about us, to have right impressions about us as being a sustainable species and whatever. So this is very, very important. It's very important also to understand that nature does not really need your interventions. And I want to say this loud and clear: environmental management, and I find that a joke. What do you mean by environmental management? How dare you talk about wanting to manage the environment? Can you manage the environment? I mean, do you have the capacity and the competence and the required acumen to manage the environment? I want to say this loud and clear today, and that's a takeaway from my lecture today or presentation. Remember one thing, girls and boys, let it be very firm, imprinted in your psyche and mind for long as you live on the planet. Earth has everything that needs to take care of itself. It's got a self-renewal system which is intrinsic to it. It's built in. You don't need to put it in place. It's got an ability to recuperate. It's got an ability to renew itself. And all your talk about restoration ecology, I mean, it sounds good, but it's like, if you understand the meaning of in situ conservation efforts and you look at a protected area which has been left unexploited, and you're not allowing any kind of exploitative activities happening. Nobody waters the trees in a forest, right? Nobody, adds fertilizer to the soil. Everything. Nature has its own intrinsic built-in mechanisms that will manage itself. It doesn't need you, please. And more often than not, what you do under the guise of management is actually mismanagement. Under the guise of intervention is interference. And I hope that's very clear to you. I love to play with words. You need to have a very clear understanding of what is intervention and what is interference. More often than not, what we do is not intervention, it is interference. What we do is not management, it is mismanagement. So I think the best thing is you allow nature to recuperate all by itself, it will renew itself. Again, if then some of you could argue with me as students or prospective postgraduates of environmental science. Come on, see, Borkar, you talk about self-renewal systems and recuperation and renewal dynamics. Then tell us, why do we have episodes of pollution? Well, I have an answer to that. Pollution is simply a consequence of what happens when you start dumping, how would I put, pollutants, or some of you would love to call it, resources out of place. See, I would put it this way. There is a certain limit to what is called a waste assimilation. It's called waste assimilation capacity, whether it's your rivers, it's your streams, whether it's your oceans. There's a limit up to which whatever you dump in the ocean, probably the ocean would be able to degrade and detoxify and maybe remineralize and flux it again through the nutrient cycle. You've got this bentopelagic coupling and whatnot. But there's a limit to it. I mean, you can't go on kicking somebody and just expecting that person not to react, right? I mean, even an ant will turn back and give you a nice, cute little sting or maybe a bite if you really intrude on its private space. And here is a system which is actually supporting it. That is your benefactor. You are the beneficiary, and you play as if you are doing something for nature and environment. So I think this is a fallacy. That we are able to manage environment is a fallacy that we have created for ourselves, and we keep on perpetuating it. The fact remains that you and I cannot manage environments, really speaking. Only environment can manage itself. It has got waste assimilation capacity, it's got self-renewal, it's got recuperation, it's got resource renewal dynamics, but you should allow it to happen. And that's exactly what I said. The best way to save environment is to save it from your assault. You don't do anything proactively to save it, right? It will take care of itself. I'm not suggesting that you ignore it, right? I'm only saying don't interfere with environmental processes. So this is very, very, and if you don't, remember, the environment reacts. There will be a reaction. And I'm just going to list out a few indicators of reaction. I'm sure all of you, if I ask you at present in Anthropocene, what are the major global environmental challenges and concerns, you start reading out the whole list to me. And I mean, you've got it by heart. You say, all right, population, pollution, poverty, inequity in access to resources, you've got bioinvasion, and you've got emerging pathogens. We are all reeling under the pressure of a pandemic, COVID-19. I mean, I was fortunate to have been infected, but I still made it. I'm still alive and talking to you. That's something great. I feel pretty good about that. But not everybody is fortunate. These are emerging pathogens which are novel, and you don't know how they behave. You don't know what kind of immune reactions they elicit. And not everybody is lucky. Now, do you realize that this is also a consequence of the mess that you've created with the environment? I'll just give you a case in point. With expanding urbanization and clearing all forests, your proximity with wild populations is progressively becoming greater. I mean, the closer you get to wild population, the zoonotic spillover or transmission is what you facilitate. And you blame China, and you blame the bats, and you blame the Wuhan wet market, and you blame the pangolins. The fact is, you need to blame your own self. That in this greed for land to accommodate your burgeoning populations and Malthusian exponential increase in your own demography, you are clearing everything. You're not living in a wilderness patches, and then you cry foul. That's not done. So this is very important, that demography is definitely a pressure. Then you have pollution. What exactly is this pollution? I mean, pollution is simply when you are unable to deal with your, I would say, consumption. You look at your consumption products, see, there's a complete gap or a mismatch between your production, consumption. There's unprecedented damage and destruction that you have unleashed on the planet simply because there's a mismatch between the production and consumption. The chemists and the chemical engineers have been creating so many new molecules that are recalcitrant and refuse to degrade. Best example is your plastic. I mean, to you, the ban on plastic. But who created plastic? Plastic is definitely not a natural resource. Plastic is surely not a earth capital. It's a manufactured capital. So I say, and let me repeat this. The crux of the whole issue is that with your so-called progress in science and technology and what have you, what you have basically done is you have sought to replace the earth capital with manufactured capital. And you claim that to be your scientific victory and, pinnacle of progress and whatever. You love to paint a very rosy picture, not quite realizing the turmoil that is accompanying all these false impressions about progress and whatever. So, of course, demography. Then in the recent past, I'm sure you've had this experience of events of extreme precipitation. Are you keeping account of how many cyclones and hurricanes and events of extreme precipitation, droughts? You've got famines and you've got hunger deaths and you've got landslides, you've got earthquakes. Have you seen in the recent 10 years? If you take a stock and statistics and if you evaluate, I think it's on a rise. I think the earth is reacting. I mean, I'm not attempting to be emotional. I'm not seeking to dramatize that. The fact is the earth is reacting. I think it's been long that you've gone assaulting, despite the fact that you knew everything about the nuances of environmental dynamism. You still chose to turn a Nelson's eye to these fatalities, and this is what you get. I mean, species loss, and I need to list it out to you. Some of these important troubles that are waiting for us include climate change, which is a huge issue, and I'm not sure. I'm a part of this expert committee that's seeking to come up with a plan to mitigate and manage climate change in the state of Goa. I'm sure every state has this attempt and effort at documenting a database and what. Can I ask you, what do you foresee? Climate change is somebody in here thinking that climate change is only about extended spells of summer heat and prolonged rains, and it's got to do with phenology, which keeps on changing. I mean, we are just probably in November, but I've got a lot of mango trees in Goa which are already, they're flowering. It's a complete change in phenology. You find arrival and departure of migratory species which is completely out of sync with the migratory patterns. You find a lot of these emerging infections. You find a lot of people getting displaced from their traditional occupations. You find loss of life and property. These are all simply manifestations of climate change. Now, by the way, who's doing this climate change? Climate change is also a consequence of The way we've conducted ourselves. I mean, why do you have climate change? Your rising level of sea. I want to tell you, most of the coastline, you are also on a coastline. You are in fact more prone to this kind of climate change in Mumbai and in Thane because a lot of your land is reclaimed. Right? So this is what I'm trying to explain to you. These are no longer, I still remember in my state in 2000, I conducted the first ever discussion and deliberation through a workshop on climate change. 20 years down the line, it is no longer a topic for webinar, no longer a topic for, how would I say, those empty discussions of intellectuals. You're actually living it. You're actually feeling it. You find it has disrupted life cycles of so many species. It is interfering with recruitment dynamics of important resources like fish. Today in your own state of Maharashtra, if you go to Sindhudurg coastline, they're already talking about fish famines, which is absolutely ridiculous because I know the Konkan coast was known for fish. Today we're talking about fish famines. You are finding new emerging invasions. I'm sure everybody knows this domain called bioinvasion. What is bioinvasion? You've got some strange species that is seeking to, slowly sneak into your landscapes and waterscapes. They multiply fast. They're extremely resilient. They dominate, and they exclude the local biodiversity. That is a threat to endemism. Now, all right. Now, you in name of how would I put it, increasing the green cover or for the purpose of agriculture, you are homogenizing your landscape. Satellite imageries will give you a very nice impression. You start claiming, like in Goa, we say 55 or 57% of Goa's geographical area is under green cover. Oh wow, claps, right? You actually go into the details and start looking for specifics. You realize the green cover that is presumed is invariably coconut groves or cashew plantations, or the worst case scenario, the acacia plantations. At the moment, I am working on wildlife management plan for 2 of our protected areas, Kotigaon and Netravati. These are pristine places. I go there practically every weekend. I'm in the forest doing a lot of ground truthing. I see the damage caused by these exotic species of acacia is intense. It is intense, but on record, on paper, you say, oh, it's all greenery. So I think this is the homogenization, human wildlife conflicts. It's very interesting. I think you have a case in you have a very I would say well publicized conflict interface at Sanjay Gandhi National Park, where you have a lot of leopards that engage in a conflict situation with the people. Oh, leopards are also very highly resilient, adapt very quickly to, almost as if they are obligate commensals or human settlements. That's amazing. In 2012, I did a small study with big carnivores in the coastal Saurashtra in Gujarat. I found that amazing again. I've seen how these Maldaris and Rabbaris and the Gujars and Ahirs, they've learned to live with the big lions. You find it thrilling to see how they live in mutual respect for one another. It's absolute perfect showcasing of harmonious relationship. What happens in urban setup and what happens with all our degrees and qualifications? We seem to be, as I say, we only preach, we don't practice. And so that's something very important. I've already spoken about emerging pathogens. So what do we do basically? I just took a stock of everything. A little bit about everything. These are the ills that I attempted to kind of list them. What do we do therefore? What do we do, really speaking? The whole world can't enroll for a course in environmental science, right? You are the privileged ones in an enviable position to get into the nitty-gritty and understand the complexities of environmental dynamics and what have you. But I think by and large, every citizen of this planet, and this is very important, it's high time we stop thinking about ourselves as Goans and Maharashtrians and Kannadigas and Malayalis, and I think and for that matter even as Indians and Asians, we now need to look at ourselves as citizens of the earth. We are the earth citizens, and somebody up there in north and somebody down in south and maybe east and west, we are all beneficiaries, and we all seek to draw our resources which are quintessentially and how would I say, absolutely necessary for our lives. And that's what makes us happy, and it sustains us, and we're able to survive, and we are able to transfer the information of our species down generations. For that to happen without any disruption or interruption, we need to sync with the rhythm of the earth. That's very important. I think we've got to be out of sync. We have to be able to synchronize our lives, our conduct, our thought process, and unfortunately the answers may not all come from sciences. I think we may have to, I don't know, that's my personal opinion, and a lot of people go critical when I say this, that we may probably have to emulate the lifestyles of some ethnic communities. We have a lot to learn from them. We may have to probably turn to scriptures to understand the ethics of ecocentrism. We may have to cut down on our use of materials and resources, and we now need to, I mean, that's what I say, now is the season of Christmas, and it's Goa is a hotbed for Christmas celebrations, and these days I see, despite all kinds of statutory warnings from the state and from health authorities, if you have, sometimes I drive by the malls. We have a few malls now in Goa too. Good old days, it used to be people would travel all the way from Goa to either Belgaum or Mumbai for looking at a mall and feel enthralled. But today, paying no heed to any kind of health advisories, people have started moving out. Their compromise on masks, sanitation, social distancing has all gone to dogs. And that is not what I'm trying to explain to you. I see them walking out of the malls, loaded with their purchases, almost as if they look like walking Christmas trees with things hanging all around them, right? 2 bags here, 3 bags there, something around the shoulder, this stuff. And I know that we have a lot of buying capacity. We are a prosperous species. We are a species which is economically prosperous, but economic prosperity does not guarantee you environmental quality. And that's my personal opinion and conviction. On the contrary, I often see a reciprocality of these two attributes. The more prosperous you economically, the more compromises your environment quality. And therefore, in just simple words, I would like to suggest that one thing that we now need to practice and preach and encourage people to adopt is this culture of, and that's called a culture of philosophy of minimalism, where you minimize your wants. It's now got to do with, see, I mean, you always talk about recycle, reduce, reuse, right? There's one more R we conveniently forget. We also need to now learn to refuse. I think that is the best thing to do. You refuse. If you refuse, there's no question of reduce or reuse or recycle. So that, in fact, that's very important. Reduce would more be in the realm of minimalism, but I think it's also important that we learn to refuse. So this is very important. We now need to revert back to humility, gratitude. We need to be more compassionate towards our own lesser fortunate, economics is also very much a part of environment. In fact, there's something called environmental economics, and all of you have been hearing about this gap and gulf between the haves and the have-nots, poverty indices, right? I think an important reason for poverty is inequity in access to resources. So I think that's very much in the scope of environmental economics and environment to be able to look at it. So all in all, what we really need to now take up and adopt and maybe understand is an ethos of being earth friendly, and that's called the earth wisdom. We have to be wise in terms of our relationship with the planet Earth. That's called earth wisdom, and that's being earth friendly as a matter of ethos, and that's a very important point. You may ask me, what about politics and environment? A lot of people, we're very fond of raising fingers at our people's representatives. And I think if you do that in Mumbai, you do that in Maharashtra, we do it in Goa, we keep on pointing fingers and say, look, this is what, please understand, in all probability, if you were to be in a position of power, then you would also switch off all your environmentalism and probably look at things from a prism of a politician. And I, for one, always believe very strongly that politicians are not really to be blamed in a sense that they possibly may not have adequate understanding of environmental issues. And therefore, I have always said this in all forums that if at all you really want to blame, it should be the bureaucrats and the technocrats. Our people or the advisory or the advisors and the coterie of advisors around the power centers is what we need to invest in. And don't stop only at blaming them. Rather, you need to engage them in a conversation. You need to engage them in a dialogue. You need to convince them on the power and the strength of upholding truth and finding answers to many of the seemingly difficult situations. I just spoke to you. The challenge and the task is to balance your developmental aspirations or electoral aspirations with your environmental concerns. It is difficult, but it's not impossible. And I think science possibly could by hiding facts, you're only going to, how would I say, usher in some sort of a iron wall between the stakeholders. That ice breaking is extremely important. And you can break ice with stakeholders, with authorities, with enforcement agencies only by being frank. And that's the power of science, that science could probably, if demystified, you don't go and speak to the politicians the language that your teachers speak to you, right? You talk about renewable dynamics and energy transfers and the entropy and enthalpy of eco-energetics. Probably he will not give you an appointment the next time you want to see him. You need to speak to people in a manner that they understand you. You need to speak to people in a language that they understand. So one important skill all of you as students of environmental science should garner and master in 2 years is how to demystify science. And that's pretty challenging. By demystifying science, I would mean you without compromising on the core content, you mystify or I would not say dilute, but you simplify the jargon, the complex lingo language that we normally use in order to talk to people. That I think should be an area that you can always look at. And that's therefore, this is very important. The role of science is of course supreme. Science, after all, is nothing but a verified and verifiable knowledge base, which you can replicate, which you can demonstrate, which you can validate, that's how it goes. So, but again, you need to know where to use your science, where you don't use your science. So environmental science, all in all, is a very fascinating journey that you have embarked on. And I'm sure in these 2 years, you will have umpteen occasions to relate much of what you imbibe in your classroom situations from your learned teachers. All your teachers are very erudite and they have seen many moons and many monsoons. And they would have a lot of examples to share with you. Do not, and I have just one important request to all of you, which I also put in with my students. And I teach in a women's college, so it's more easier for me to convince the young women who are kind of very receptive. I'm not complaining about the receptivity. Boys, don't misconstrue what I say. But, I always tell them that one important aim of education is not to prepare oneself for a career. That's of course important. Ultimately, I have to earn my bread and butter, right? But I can always earn my bread and butter by still being ethical, by still being earth-friendly, and by still being able to enthuse others to, fall in line with, as I put it, the rhythms of the earth. I think that is a challenge. That it's not enough to feel content and happy. The quest and hunger for knowledge can never ever be satiated. The thirst cannot be quenched. Learning is a lifelong process. I still, even after 34 years of teaching, there are veterans and seniors like Dr. Usha and Dr. Kare. They are much more senior to me. But I still, when people ask me, I say I'm still a student of zoology. I'm still a student of nature, environment. So I'm no big person to kind of advise and sermonize, but all that I would share with you today is don't let that quest and curiosity for information and that inquisitive nature die out in you ever, whether it is 2 years down the line or even till the last breath we learn. We learn actively, we learn passively, we learn from experiences, we learn by witnessing things. Keep your eyes and ears open. That will also save you from the risk of Alzheimer's or dementia. The more active your brain is, the more troubled your brain is, the more occupied your gray matter is, the lesser the chances of all kinds of neurological pathologies. So be alert. Let the body age, it doesn't matter. Its geriatric progression is inevitable. Mortality is guaranteed, it doesn't matter. So don't start brooding over an event which is certainly uncertain and uncertainly certain, and that is death. We're going to be caught by that one day, but just in the fear of dying and the fear of getting old, don't let the the brain, which is the, you know, it's one of the most exemplary and, how would I say, mind-boggling bioengineered, how would I put it, artifact that we have in our body. It's a natural, I don't know how to look at it, but it's wonderful. So assimilate information, take it and use your discretion in keeping what you think is relevant and eliminating what you think is not. So I think more or less, I would only want to conclude by, you know, giving one small, if Dr. Kai and Dr. Usha allows me another 2 minutes, ma'am. 2 minutes more, can you allow?
Yes, yes, go ahead, sir, please.
Just 2 minutes. I would just like to tell everybody, I have troubled you enough with a lot of heavy information and philosophies, but I would like to end on a very interesting anecdote, which is got from, you know, how would I put it, from the lives and times of Swami Vivekananda. We are all Indians, right? We are Indians, and we should be proud of Indian culture and our, how would I say, philosophers and thinkers. It's a very interesting story which some of you probably would have heard. And I love to narrate this as a concluding statement, that it seems this story is about a boy who had this nasty habit of wasting his food in the plate, right? And the father used to be always pretty aggrieved and upset at this habit of this little fellow. So he decides to say, look, tomorrow morning we go and meet Swamiji in his mutt, and I want you to be advised by the holiness, right? So in the morning, they said, good old days, they probably move by a bullock cart. It's a long journey, arduous journey. And then Swamiji is pretty busy with his disciples. And anyway, in between is the man and his little fellow is ushered in. So Swamiji says, "Aap bataiye, kyun aaye ho?" So this man says, Swamiji, ऐसा है कि ये मेरा बच्चा है, हमेशा खाना छोड़ देता है, ठीक है, थाली में, तो आप थोड़ा उपदेश दे दीजिएगा. And Swamiji very beautifully advises him. He says, देखो, I mean, rather, I'm sorry. He says, you do one thing, you get him in 15 days time. ठीक है? He just listens and he looks at the boy and the man, I'm sorry. And he says, will you please come 15 days later? ठीक है? तो ये चले जाते हैं. And 15 days later, the story repeats. He comes back to the mutt or the ashram, and Swamiji very politely makes the little fellow sit, and he says, look, you know, this is a gift of God. Not everybody is fortunate to get a square meal a day. Therefore, and it's a precious resource. Not everybody is fortunate to, you know, have food. There are a lot of people who sleep on empty stomach. तो बेटा, आज के बाद जो है ना, जितना चाहिए उतना ही थाली में ले लेना. वेस्ट आप छोड़ना नहीं बिल्कुल, ठीक है? तो ये छोटा सा लड़का भी समझ जाता है तुरंत. And of course it's over, but the father of this little fellow is a little, you know, upset. He says, इतनी छोटी बात जो कहनी है, अगर ये कहनी होती तो 15 दिन बाद आपने क्यों बुलाया? उसी दिन कहते स्वामी जी, है ना? तो स्वामी जी कहते हैं कि you look, he says, look, I sent you back last fortnight and I asked you to come again after 15 days because last time when you came 15 days ago, I was not on ethical and moral grounds to advise your son because I had exactly the same nasty habit of wasting food. So Swami says, first I corrected myself, and then I thought I was on ethical and moral grounds to correct your child. Now, what is the essence of the story? It's very simple. The essence of the story is what? You have to be a leader by demonstration. It is not enough to sermonize. बातें करने से कुछ नहीं होगा. You have to demonstrate. जैसा आप behave करोगे, वही आपका नैतिक अधिकार वही बनता है जो आप खुद बर्ताव करते हो. If you are not able to practice what you preach, you should not practice what you preach. I mean, empty rhetoric. So this is something very important that all of us, irrespective of our domain expertise and whatever, I think we need to strictly follow this. But सिर्फ उसी बात को आप दूसरों से अपेक्षित कीजिएगा जिसका आप अपने खुद के आचरण में क्या कहते हैं ला सकते हो. I mean, there is no point in simply talking tall and, you know, making a fool of yourself when you don't preach it yourself. So with these few words, I think I have taken enough and more time. It's almost 4:32. I've been speaking to you for more than an hour now. And I really appreciate your patience because I'm in this dirty habit of speaking continuously. You would have realized I don't even stop to take a breath. I speak continuously like your, I don't know who's the singer, Hariharan. Not Hariharan. Yeah, I'm sorry, whoever it is. He sings continuously, right? Breathless.
Yeah, breathless.
वो मेरा भी मैडम मैं भी खुद ब्रेथलेस हूँ वैसे भी आई एम अ पेशेंट ऑफ एस्थमा आल्सो बट आई डोंट नो somehow when I connect with a very receptive audience like today's session it gives me that extra energy कहीं से आ जाती है ऊर्जा आ जाती है और बड़ा अच्छा महसूस हो गया आज थैंक यू सो मच God bless and I think I am more than prepared to take any of your queries and questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sir, few questions I'm very sure students have. So students, you are, as very rightly sir said, science is an by not type of teaching. As you go along, you'll realize that how well you can contribute. और सर आपकी एक बात बहुत अच्छी लगी कि अपनी जो डिमांड है उसको कम करना है. That is one way of contributing. So sustainability आ जाएगी. So students, if you have question, you can either post it on the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask. So at least I want to few questions.
Usha ma'am, I would prefer if they unmute and kind of communicate with me rather than type it in the chat box.
Sir, unless and until they have an internet issue, they will unmute and they will ask questions.
कोई बात नहीं, जैसे वो चाहे.
Student, please, the session is open for questions, and sir has been very, very generous. He has shared lot of information. Sir is an encyclopedia by himself. So please ask if you have any questions. Kale sir, you break the ice otherwise. I and Kale are permanent students here.
No, I think that is the spirit.
Yeah. Sir, can I ask one question?
Please, ma'am. Please.
Sir, आपका मैंने देखा स्कॉर्पियन में आपका कोई स्टडी बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग लगा.
जी मैम.
तो आप थोड़ा उसके ऊपर बता सकते हैं कि exactly what type of work?
बिल्कुल मैम. हालांकि I have a very interesting academic track record. I don't know. I started with marine zoology way back in the 87. I hope I don't sound boisterous, but I'm a gold medalist of Bombay University in marine zoology in the year 1987. For whatever reasons, I never wanted to be a teacher. That was my last option. But destiny brought me into academic. I always wanted to be a scientist at the National Institute of Oceanography because I am Goan. Now, I thought 2 years down the line I would, and two stalwarts from Institute of Science, Dr. Parwekar, बहुतेक काळे सर ओळखत असतील, डॉक्टर अरुण परवेकर आणि डॉक्टर अरुण वाघ. So these are stalwarts and we have grown up, during our college days seeing and listening to this stalwarts. So, but unfortunately, as things would, never, kind of give to your expectations, that was somehow a dream and it continued to be a dream. So I was kind of pushed into academics against my will. And somewhere in 94, I did another master's program in ecology and environment. उसके बाद फिर यही, I felt I was still incomplete and I registered for a PhD at the Institute of Science in an altogether different subject of endocrinology. It took me 7 years to complete and submit my thesis. That is another story in itself. Lekin I started working on the marine fisheries, ichthyofauna of Goa. Uske baad I got a project on crocodiles. Then I got into butterflies and dragonflies. And finally now, I've even worked on large carnivores and Gangetic River dolphin in Assam. And now I have somehow settled, in arachnology. Now I have a school of arachnology in my setup called the Biodiversity Research Cell, which was established in the exactly 20 years ago, to be precise. And I don't actually work, pardon me, on scorpions per se, but as zoologists, you may be aware that there is this order called Amblypygae and Europygae. These are called whip spiders and whip scorpions. So for the state of Goa, the first definitive record for both these have come from my school of research. And currently I'm working on whip scorpion on a DST sponsored research project. Whip scorpion is also called as vinegaroon. Simply because if you agitate it, it kind of sprays a secretion which smells like vinegar. It's very strong acetic acid odor. So currently I'm attempting to do a little bioprospecting, attempting to understand the compositional, how would I say, constitution of the defense play. And my area of interest, I would not say expertise though, is functional morphology. I'm now more looking at fine structures. During my PhD days, I worked on transmission electron microscopy, but unfortunately in Goa, we don't have the facilities for TEM. हमारे यहाँ SEM की facility है. And fortunately, the National Institute of Oceanography and National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, जिसको पहले हमारे यहाँ National Center for Antarctic and Ocean Research कहते थे. So these people are, the scientific community is extremely kind to me, and we have a tacit understanding. We also have an MOU with some of these institutes, and I'm able to access their state-of-the-art facility, including this scanning electron microscope. So in the last 10 years, I have been working more on arachnids, and that too these archaic orders. I don't work on true spiders. I don't work on actual scorpions. I work on whip spiders and whip scorpions, which are actually not spiders, not scorpions. These are misnomers. And I'm very happy to share with you that hopefully next month, I will have a publication in a Scopus journal, which will be the first paper on speleobiology for the state of Goa, which is cave biology. So cave biology is a completely ignored field in India. It's in infancy, except for National Cave Research Organization in Raipur, Chhattisgarh. Professor Jayant Biswas is the only well-known speleobiologist across the world. But otherwise, I think as students of environmental science also, अगर आप में से बच्चों में से कोई यदि project work cave biology पे करे, तो it will be a fantastic contribution and to there's a lot of gaps and lacuna in our understanding of cave biology. So this is more or less what I do. I have another 7 years of service left. Despite a very profuse graying in my scalp, I still have 7 years more to work in academics. And I hope to kind of address a few more gaps. By the grace of God, my enthusiasm has not declined. I'm still very keen and willing to, probably register for new courses and maybe register for another PhD also if somebody can take me as a student. शरीर तो थक गया अभी, लेकिन I think by the grace of God, this is still alert. As we grow, now other day, last week I was in some of the caves in Netravadi. I thought I was still very young, and I jumped from one boulder down and I injured my knee. That happens, but this is all a part of, as I say, we should not be deterred by geriatric progression. That is bound to happen as long as the brain is active. Anna, sir?
Sir, a question.
Yes, sir, please.
In your qualification itself, you have done a course in sustainable development. Do you really believe in sustainability, being an ecologist?
Sir, I beg your pardon. Could you please repeat the question? I could not catch it fully.
I in person believe, sir, that development uses the resources.
True.
And therefore, anything coming under development, right, in my opinion, cannot be sustainable.
Okay, fine. I respect your opinion. I understood the question now, whether I concur with you. Well, frankly speaking, sustainability, in my opinion, is only about judicious use. Now, the term judicious and responsible is extremely relative and, is subject to interpretation. But I definitely agree with you that you possibly cannot have development without destruction to a certain extent. And that is exactly what I was trying to harp on. All that we need to do, therefore, to, sort of, how would I say, compensate for the damage consequent of development is allow that resource to recuperate. If you probably heard me going a bit caustic on our so-called interventions, which invariably turn out to be interferences, and management which invariably gets mismanagement. I think every constituent of nature has a self-renewal system. It has its own dynamism or resource renewal dynamic. Sir, आपल्याकडे problem तोच आहे की our exploitative pace is faster than the resource renewal dynamics. That is the crux of the issue. We should allow that resource to recuperate. That is probably what our scriptures have told us. when maybe in the guise of religion, when we practice voluntary moratorium, for instance in Goa, we are a fish loving community, पण श्रावणात इथे मासेमारी होत नसते किंवा आपण मासे खात नसतो, तर त्याच्या मागचं शास्त्रीय कारण बहुधा हेच असावं की त्यामुळे we have again, kind of this is my small way of looking at, but I agree with you, sir.
Right.
I think the students probably are not, I have not instigated them enough.
Sir, that is a little problem.
No problem,
that
madam. No
they are
problem.
still not very, I can say, open about asking questions. It takes
No
some
issues,
time.
madam.
for ice to break.
You please tell them. I mean, now I am seeking. I mean, I am inviting myself. Maybe God willing, when pandemic gets over, I will personally come to your college and deliver
Yes.
a few
Sir, and
lectures.
this is not the first
Wow.
session. We are going to invite you
Most
more
certainly.
often because मुझे लग रहा है कि
बिल्कुल
हमारा
नहीं।
wavelength बहुत अच्छा जमने
बिल्कुल
वाला है.
मैम, बिल्कुल मैम, मैं तो खुद इतना भी, I mean, let me offer my services even to engage a few courses more formally in
Thank
any
you.
of your papers. I'll
Thank
be
you
more than
very
happy.
much, sir.
I
Thank
will be
you.
more than happy, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So I
Thank
think
you
we'll
very
close
much,
the
sir.
session here for today.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is my proud privilege to extend a very big heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Dr. Manoj Borkar
My
for
pleasure.
this very wonderful session. And sir, from your session, I could realize the enthusiasm and the passion that you have for the environment as such. I won't call environment as a subject because each one of us is a part of that. So we really cannot give it a, what you can say, a framework. And there are a couple of things which I myself take home. One is the environment management as such, because now I and Kale often use this word, cosmetology of subjects.
Very true.
Right. And disaster, I thought, preparedness part, we are more interested.
True.
See, we are aware, okay, these could be the probable disasters, but having seen them, we are not proactive, we are only reactive.
Very
So
true.
maybe at least some of these students would be some policy maker. And this program, we don't intend to run it as a very conventional type of like question answer pado exam though. We would like them to at least come out with some original case studies. So
Very
we
good.
want them to read more and have a discussion forum every day. So
Very nice.
topics, okay, वो तो बड़ी बात नहीं है, and they will get a degree at the end of the day. But how
Bilkul.
far they are able to apply themselves and how far they are able to disseminate and how
Ji.
far they are able to contribute.
Ji,
And
ma'am.
Kale used the word whether development and sustainability go hand in hand. So at least whether these children are aware of the sustainable goals, whether our Niti Aayog, whatever they have come out with the report, and how many of them are able to read a report and then review it and then give their opinion and think about it. So we wanted entire this program to be a thought-provoking program and not merely getting a PG degree, but they should be able to contribute in their own way, whether it is in terms of being an educationist or being an NGO or being in one of these. We are also in talks with BMC, Bombay Municipal Corporation, especially for the disaster. See, sir, our policies are very much there. But the implementation and finally the deliberation on that, somewhere along the line, things get distorted.
I understand.
Right, the SOPs, whether these children, because this pandemic itself is going to be in history. See,
True.
like the way we are going back into the early 1900 to talk about the Spanish flu, and we are digging up with all the papers. And there's another thing in our own way, we want this entire program to be a paperless one. So even
Very
though they
nice,
will be
very
doing
nice.
practicals, they will use only green chemistry and they will be
Fantastic.
using only the digital media to record everything.
बहुत अच्छी
So
बात
it will
है.
not be like you are having paper cuttings and then you are making a file, but they would like to digitalize things and make a repository. So these are some of the ideas that we have. Let's see how enthusiastic the
Very
team is.
nice, very
So
nice.
with this, Dr. Borkar, you are very much a family of Gunjarwala College.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for giving this wonderful talk. I'm very sure they are going to reflect on it and think about it. And tomorrow when Kale sir engages the first session, so at that time again, so it will, we want the entire sessions to be more like an interactive dialogue type of session rather than a monologue. So with this,
Absolutely.
thank you very much, sir.
Very grateful to you again, and God bless you
Thank you.
for this.
Thank
I
you, sir.
pray
Thank
to
you.
God that you all enjoy good health and your institution
Yes.
rises higher and
Yes.
higher.
And we are very
And-
enthusiastic about everything. I think
Yes,
somewhere
ma'am.
we have
I would
inherited that.
I would also request you to kindly share a copy of this recording with me at the earliest
Sure,
possible.
sir. Sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Thank you
Very
very
well.
much. Highly
Thank
appreciate.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kale
Kale
sir.
sir. Bye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Kale sir, tomorrow you
Jai
have a session at
Maharashtra.
2 o'clock.
Yes.
Sir, namaskar.
Jai Maharashtra.
Bye-bye, sir. Bye.
Bye. Bye.